So tonight we've got Tuvia Vinitsky. He's going to show me your license, which you presented just last year at Southwest Fox, right? Which I did
Correct.
not get to see, so this is good for me at least. Hopefully it'll be good for everybody else. Tuvia, over to you.
Okay. Tonight's session is Show Me Your License, VFP control of licenses, updates, and configurations. Let me just move this out of the way here. Okay. Vinitsky Consulting, the company that we run here in Chicago, develops markets, major vertical applications for nonprofit organizations. That's a specialty of ours, such as JCCs and YMCAs. However, in addition to that, we provide custom software and website development and services to companies of all sizes, from Fortune 500 companies all the way down to mom and pop businesses where mom doesn't even know she's in the business yet. I personally have been with Fox way back since the original days of FoxBase and CompuServe. I used to write for magazines like Fox Talk. One of the things that has always been a personal interest of mine is expanding the capabilities of FoxPro. Back in the days of DOS, I worked with some people to have a graphic printer driver so that we could have output that would be the same in appearance as Windows, because of course we were told in those days that DOS was going to be around forever. Needless to say, we had to throw that code out. And I've worked with clients. I used to be a project manager for IBM and Lotus, Avis Rent-A-Car, and other companies before I went into business for myself.
Hey, Tuvia, we're getting a slight echo. Do you want to put everybody on mute them? Got to go into that phone button.
Phone button, sure. All right. Mute air.
The conference is now in presentation mode.
There you go. So just you and I have mics now. If anybody's got a question, put it in the chat window and I'll stop Tuvia. Go ahead, Tuvia. Did we lose you now?
The conference is now in conversation mode.
Yeah, I can only mute myself with that control.
There should be, it's like in the right corner of that chat window, it should say mute them.
It does say mute them.
The conference is now in presentation mode.
Yeah, it usually says we're in presentation mode, but we lose you on voice even when you do that.
The conference is now in conversation mode.
Conversation mode, and you are, your line is muted.
Well, that's weird. All right, we'll have to leave it that way. I guess everybody out there, if you've got a mute available on your microphone, if you could turn that on, and hopefully we'll lose that little bit of echo we were having.
All right. It could be, since I'm pumping up this call over the internet here, I could call from a landline or something into see if that makes any difference. How bad is it?
The background noise wasn't bad, and now that I've scolded everybody, it'll probably be better.
All right. Mel said not bad, so.
Yeah.
I like Mel. All right. So VFP is unusual in desktop platforms. The runtime files, as we know, to operate a distributed application don't require any license fee. So therefore, the most basic user can obtain a VFP runtime and run any VFP program. Now that's a tremendous asset to us as developers, and a tremendous boon to us in terms of being able to distribute programs at a reasonable cost, but it presents the problems of application control. User counts and licenses, update processes, and site configuration can easily slip out of our control, resulting in lost revenue or negative user experience. These VFP issues, even though it's a free runtime, should be controlled by the application. This evening, I hope to point out 4 different things that your application should and could control: site licensing techniques, user licensing techniques, version update techniques, and customized code in the general application. You should know a little something about VFP in order to participate in tonight's session. The PowerPoint slides are a review tool. You can download a Word document that has the complete code in the appendixes at the URL that you see on your screen now. About 15 minutes before we started, I was told that URL is actually being maintained right now and won't be up for another hour or so. But nonetheless, if you make a note of that URL, you'll be able to get not only a copy of you'll be able to copy of the Word document that has the full code and not just excerpts in it. Site licensing, number one. A developer's nightmare is walking into a prospective new client. You present your idea, and the client likes what you have. And then they proceed to but you know what? We're not sure we want to use you because we have some really good software right now. And of course you turns out that the software they really have is an illegitimate copy of what you were trying to sell them in the first place. Someone just asked me to repeat that URL, and you can grab it off of the chat or the screen there. It'll be up to the we'll update the latest. Make sure the things are up there as soon as the site's back up shortly. Now, so site licensing makes sure that the site is licensed to use the software. We're dealing with the individual users logging in and how many are there. But when we walk into XYZ company is running your software, should be running your software. So the goals for good site licensing control would be as follows. Accurately identify legal sites. Allow for easy changes to the application's trial or limited status. It should not interfere with normal usage. This is a big one. Users don't like things that, even though they may help with licensing, interfere with their normal user experience. So it should be seamless and unseen by the user, and it should prevent moving the software to some other company's location without your permission. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 4 different ways to do that. And then after we look at each one of those 4s, we're going to rate them on a scale of 1 to something. And we're going to see which one of these 4 options comes out based on our rating scales. And we're going to use these goals as our rating scales. So we're going to look at all 4 options, and then we're going to come back at the end of each option to these 5 goals and see how each one of those options fits in with this goal. The first option is to purchase a commercial DLL. So there are a lot of products on the market that provide either an ActiveX or a DLL designed to be used for site activation. One that a lot of VFP developers has used is something called Crypto License. It's from Logic NP. It has a long track record and is used successfully by a lot of VFP developers. You can go to their website and get a trial version. The concept is as follows. Along with your application, you install an ActiveX control. In this case, the control has a name. Now, it has to be registered on every station that's going to log into the application, even though we're only dealing with site license so far. It has no dependencies, though, and it can be easily installed and registered on the fly. Now, what happens is you create in your crypto license developer control panel a project with options and limitations. How long can they use the software? Is it beta? How can they use it a certain amount of time? What is the site they're allowed to use it at? And there's a whole control panel with dozens of options. You can literally do everything that you see in the highest level commercial product using this relatively inexpensive crypto license. Now what happens is once you set all of the different options, it generates a key. Now the key is some long gobbledygook string like this. And what happens is when the user logs in, either that key has to be there or the first time they do it, they will have to put in that key. I'm sorry, that did not come out. Let me re-explain that. Either when they install the software, they can enter this key, or you can provide them a one-time encrypted file that will take this key, will automatically incorporate it the first time they run the program. So this long key is based on all of the options that Now every time the application loads, you have to call the crypto license load method, and that determines if a valid license is installed. Now, since we're giving each site its own key, we can also put all kinds of things into that license. We can put the name of the company, etc. So every time the application loads, lost me. Okay.
Just for a second there, we lost you. You're good right now.
Oh, I'm back? Okay, I'm back. So every time the application loads, you have to call the load method of this control, and it returns true. And you cannot run the application at all until you have called this load method. And it checks the license, and it implements all of the different parameters of the license. It could be the company name, the dates, all the different things, and then that license is tied to that site. If they were to try and copy the program somewhere else, they would have to have that same license key, and that same license key would come up Mike's company, and if you filtered it down far enough to IP addresses or LANs or things like that, it would be physically impossible for them to run that program, that FoxPro EXE, on any other LAN, because the crypto license method will not validate the key since it doesn't meet the criteria. Now, let's see how using a commercial DLL meets our goals. Does it accurately identify legal sites? On a scale of 1 to 5, I gave that a 2 because it accurately allows a legal site to run, but it doesn't identify who the site is other than the fact that they've put in a valid key. So theoretically, if you did not drill down far enough in the details of your key, or someone else took that key, it is possible to hack that and do it somewhere else. I was debating whether that's a 2 or a 3, but I gave it a 2. Now, it allows you to the applications trial, or I just heard another. Am I still there?
Yeah, still there.
Okay, allow for easy changes to applications trial or limited status. All you have to do is give them a new key, and you can change anything you want. It does not interfere with normal usage. The user sees anything. You call a crypto license load method, and if it returns true, you go on. It's seamless by the user. It doesn't physically prevent copying the software. So I only gave it a 1. On a scale of 1 to 25, using a commercial DLL, I rated it as a 16 out of 25 to accomplish our 5 goals. Now, our next option is to combine the DLL that we just used with an activation server. We're only going to change a couple of minor things. Rather than just using a locally provided key, the crypto license load method is going to ping a web server, which is running a crypto license service, and rather than getting license keys from whatever the user typed in, it'll grab a license key from the website. Now, the additional security to that is we see who is grabbing keys. So if we have a client and all of a sudden someone else is grabbing their key, that would obviously be a signal to us that something is wrong. It also means that we can adjust the parameters without having to have the user retype in a new key number. Because every time the program starts, every time it calls that load method, it checks the server and downloads its own key. So it's a little bit better at identifying legal sites. It's still easy to change. Now, it definitely interferes with the normal usage of the user, because if the internet or that server is either not available or more likely responding slowly, the user will have no idea what's going on. All they will see is that their program is not loading properly. So it can be seamless or maybe not seamless. That doesn't do much to prevent the actual physical copying. I gave that a 13 on a scale of 1 to 25. Now, we have a third option, which is to take our DLL and add a requirement that a physical device be attached to the computer for every computer running the software or on the LAN server. This physical device has to be plugged in to a USB port on their network, or the system is not going to run. Now, this identifies the site, but it does not allow for easy changes to the application status because you need a new hardware key. It definitely interferes with normal usage and is not going to be happy with the user, but it definitely prevents the moving of software in unlicensed location. So this is much more strict in terms of security, but much more of a pain for the user. So even though it gets high scores on security, it gets lower scores on not interfering with the user, and we get a 13.5. Our fourth option is roll your own. Okay, you don't have to actually roll it yourself. GLR software, a VFP program that mimics the functionality of the commercial DLLs. Therefore, you don't need to install an ActiveX control or a third-party DLL. It basically does the same thing. It looks for a key, either locally or on a web server, and you can get it at this URL here. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a free download. So what happens is you have an auth code PRG, which creates the keys, and the key can be on tight controls like the machine ID, which means it could never be moved, a file server name, which is a good thing, etc. So very similar in concept to all the options that the DLL had, and it also can work either locally with a key or off of a licensed server. The advantage being is that instead of having to install a DLL, you have the PRG, and of course the code then is under your control. So this is pretty good. We can identify the sites, but it does not allow for changing the status much because you've got a VFP PRG built into your program. So changes are not as easy as it seems. However, because it's built into the FoxPro EXE, it doesn't interfere with anything from the user, but it doesn't do much to prevent moving. And we got a 17. Now, the problem we're having with our first goal of site licensing is we were shooting for a score of 25. We got a commercial DLL, which had a score of 16. A DLL 13, added with an activation server, adding a key at 13.5, and roll your own to 17. So even at 17, we're not really close to 25. We have to say the clear winner and the best way of doing site licensing is there's not a clear winner. What we have to do is determine when we're managing site licensing what our goal is. When I redid the resolution, the lines on this slide slid up a little bit. Sorry about that. So if my set of priorities is 1, 2, 3, my first priority is I want to prevent theft no matter what. Counterfeit detection is also a good thing. And then my third and lowest level of requirement is a user experience. Then I would use a DLL with a device. If theft prevention is my highest priority, but then user experience is more important than counterfeit detection, I would use a DLL with an activation server, and etc. Counterfeit detection is my most important. I could use a DLL with a device and a server. No one's ever moving that program anywhere, etc. All the way down to if user experience is my highest priority, I'm going to end up using VFP. Maybe I'll have an activation server depending on what my next highest priority is. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sets of priorities that would determine the least of all evils for site licensing. There is, in my most humble opinion, no solution for site licensing that meets all the criteria that we would really want it to have. It's completely a matter of selecting the least bad option for the user. So depending on whether the user experience or theft prevention or counterfeit detection is the most important, would determine what you would do to license your sites. So we use the VFP system down here because user experience is our highest priority, followed by theft prevention. Now, site licensing was the first of our 4 areas that should be under VFP control. The second is user licensing. Now, the developer is at a site using his software, and you notice 10 people are logged in, and they've purchased a 5-user license. Now, that's something that is very common. So the goals for user licensing are as follows. We're going to give 7 goals. Accurately, and we're going to rate our options against these goals on a scale of 1 to 5 again. We're going to accurately identify legal user counts. We want to allow for easy changes to the number of licensed users. We don't want to interfere with normal operations. We want to be seamless. We want to accurately determine the number and the ID of currently people that are logged in. We want no ghost users where people have logged out but the system thinks they're still logged in. And we also want it to provide us with a way to determine if exclusive data access is possible. If I want to do a data update, I need to accurately know whether or not people are logged in. Now, it's true I can try opening the files exclusively, etc., but what we'll see is that is only part of the problem. There are 4 options for user licensing: commercial DLL, login and logout tracking, tickle the hardware, and let VFP do the work. The first option is our old friend, commercial DLL. We can even use the same crypto license product. And that key, instead of just one key for the whole LAN, each computer can have a key, and that key will be applied against the ActiveX control, and it will determine how many people are allowed to log in, and it will do that by querying the file server for how many connections are currently open to that file. And it will make sure that no more than the proper amount log in. That's not bad. It accurately identifies the legal user counts. It's not that hard to change. It's so-so in terms of interfering with the normal usage. If everything is going smoothly, it's okay. But you have to write a lot of code to handle what happens when the load method says there's too many people logged in. That's not a simple matter. It definitely determines the number of people logged in. It generally prevents ghost users, and you can determine if anyone else is logged in. So on a scale of 1 to 35, that's a 28. Now, our commercial DLL is a much more practical solution for user licensing than it was for site licensing. Let's take a look at the next option, which is the classic VFP. You know it, you love it. It's in 1985, login, logout tracking. A table contains all the valid users, along with their password, their security level, their login dates, etc. More popularly, one table has a date for each user, and one table is a running log of user logins. So, since I can't, I'm putting these graphics in here because I can't switch to FoxPro. The screen sharing here will not let me do that, or it will let me do that actually, but you won't see it. So a user table might look like this, where we have a user, a first name, a last name, a password, a group, etc. And a log table might just be a running log of all the users, their login and their logout times. A very simple and very classic VFP solution. But it doesn't work all that great because it identifies legal user counts, but it's up to you to enforce it in code. There's no actual way to enforce it physically. You can change the number of licensed users, but you have to provide them with a new table or a new code. And it definitely interferes with their normal usage because of the fact that it's prone to ghost users, which we'll get you back in a second. It's also determining really who's logged in. And the biggest problem is all those things are tied to the problem of ghost users. We all know that every VFP user properly exits the program every time you use it. But in reality, they don't. Therefore, if they don't properly log off, you're left with the ghost users, people that logged in and have never logged out. And determining if those people are really logged in is a lot of work. Even if you use station IDs or network IDs, it doesn't always help because the person could be logged in from a different location. It's often difficult to tell whether or not a person is truly logged in, especially if your system allows one person to log in simultaneously from more than one place under the same user ID. So although the system is relatively simple, it does not accomplish most of our goals. It's seamless. It doesn't get a 5 in any area, and it doesn't accomplish really our goals. I gave it a 19.5. Tickle the hardware. It's possible to query the LAN. and determine how many open file locks are on any designated file. Therefore, you could allow the application to determine that X number of users have the file open. Therefore, X number of users must be active. I think this slide makes it clear how I feel about that. This is absolutely not even worth rating. It is almost impossible to successfully do without error, and almost impossible to do in a reliable manner. So that it comes up in discussion, so I wanted to mention it here, that using the operating system to determine how many people are really logged into a file is a bad idea. Option 4, let VFP do the work. Let's use VFP to build a user checking system that meets our goals better than the other 3. Let's take an example of a 5-user license. We need a procedure to make sure that we have a control table, the same number of records as we have licenses. And you'll see that code in the doc file. But basically, if you have 5 users, you have control DBF that has 5 records. Now, once you have a table with the exact number of records, to perform a login, we scan the table, find an unlocked record, lock it. So, for example, here, the first thing that we do is, I don't know if you see the cursor of my mouse here, we open the table, and we make sure we have the right number of records. Then let's pretend we have 5 records. Now we scan it. If we can get a record lock, then we put into there who's logged in, or whatever information we want. In our case, we put in the login name and the name of the machine. You could put in whatever information you want. If it scans through and it does not find any open records, then it returns false and the user is not allowed to log in. Because if there are 5 records in the table and all 5 are locked, how many people are logged in? 5. The beauty of this is the simplicity. It can't fail. When VFP exits, an R-lock is automatically released. Ghost records are impossible. You can store the record number of the control DBF, and we can recall or update user-specific data. They logged in yesterday from this machine. They logged in a week ago from another machine. They can have multiple logins as long as they don't exceed their 5. If we wanted to disallow the same user from logging in from 2 different machines, we could check for the username prior to doing our R-lock. Now, we can also use this control table to show a user who else is legitimately logged in. And when we need exclusive use of tables or a database, we have the option of opening the control table exclusively. Once we open the control table exclusively, no one will ever get an R-lock on it, and no one will be able to log in. And we could return the appropriate message. This is a better system. It's the simplicity, all these things that people are trying to do, and there's a very simple way to do it in VFP. Accurately identifies the legal user counts. I gave it a 4.5 because I guess it is possible for someone to sneak into a DBF if they wanted to. It's an easy change. It doesn't interfere. It's accurate. There's no ghost users. You can determine exclusive data access. 32 out of 35, and I think I was being conservative. The best way to manage user licensing is just let VFP do it for you. Use the R-lock. Done something similar against SQL Server? Yes. Excellent question. Yes. Use the same concept against SQL Server. Not sure. I believe MySQL also. After that, I'm not sure. You know, I'd have to pull up that up and the top of my head. I don't remember exactly how we did that. But if you want, I'll make a note here, and I will check, and maybe later tonight or tomorrow put that up in the document. But this concept is so simple, and it works perfect. So our commercial DLL got a 28, our login and logout tracking 19, tickle the hardware 0. FoxPro, let VFP do the work. The winner is let VFP do the work. Now, we have paused for a station identification, a brief digression. Why do they want to stay in forever? Users like to log in and stay logged in with the application minimized. Now, we want to communicate with them about something, but they ignore the messages because it's minimized in their tray, and they stay logged in all day for convenience. This is a problem we had all the time with companies that don't want to buy more licenses than they really need. But the users users who use it 30 minutes a day like to log in at breakfast and log out at dinner, if ever. So, and administrators are not so happy about those licenses being used up. So we like to offer the option of timing out users after a certain period of inactivity. We used to have a lot of different ways of doing this until I found a much better way by Christoph Wallenhaupt, whose name I am probably butchering, but who is a FoxPro expert. It uses a timer control and a bind event, and it executes designated code after X amount of time of inactivity. The code is short, it's elegant, and even though it's not really on our main topic, I just wanted to mention it because I think that it is very worthwhile. We used to have all kinds of convoluted code that did this, and now a very short piece of code will do all that, and you can see the URL where you can grab it there. So a slight digression, but something that I feel is important is that we should be able to log users out when we want. And it's not just logging them out by stopping the program. You can execute any code you want. So you can check the status of anything that you want, and it's not, it's as close to foolproof as it could be. Now, the third of our fourth thing that should be under VFP control is version updates. Few things are as frustrating to users as having to manage unwieldy updates. Everybody get out of the system. We have to update it. Blah. So we want to have a system that updates the software to newer versions. We want to have the user option of when to check for updates. We want an update process that is as seamless to the user as possible. Now, it shouldn't require action by the user other than approving the start of the update. In other words, once the user is running the update, anything that needs to be done, updating structures, whatever, should all be done under our control. The user shouldn't have to run 15 different things, and it should update any file structures, ActiveX, whatever it needs to update so that when the user is done running the update, they are completely normalized again. So we're going to look at 3 different possibilities, and we'll rate them against these 4 goals. The 3 different possibilities are everybody out now, loaders, and self-update with version checking. Everybody out now, the original VFP strategy gold. Everybody get out while someone copies in the new files. I think we can all agree this is not a good system. The user has minimal control. The only thing it does do is, since you're personally copying things, you can update any files that you need. On a scale of 1 to 10, everybody out now strategy gets a 7. Now loaders are, if you look in the universal thread and you search and download, assuming you still can see all the old files, you'll see a lot of loaders. And in a LAN environment, each user on their local workstation has a local executable. And the first thing that the executable performs, myapp.exe, is it calls a file myapp.app. And it sees whether it's the same version as the master copy of myapp.app on the shared LAN location. So let's say on server 1 / shared location, we have myapp.app version 3. On my C drive, I start up myapp.app and it's version 2. So myapp.exe loads, I'm sorry, I didn't mean load, copies the newer version down to the local C drive. Now that loader executable could also pull down updated DBF structures. It could do anything else we want. However, it cannot update files that are currently shared on the LAN. But for basic input updates, thank you, Mel. For basic updates, it does work. The only you need to update that myapp.exe master program. That's a bit of a problem. So it gives the user the option of when to check for updates because it checks every time they log in. It's relatively seamless. It does require some action because somehow or other the new versions have to get on the LAN. And in terms of updating the file structures, it can do it on the workstation, but the master files cannot really be updated because it doesn't have that capability. So we're up from a 7 to a 10 on a scale of 1 to 20. Now, self-update with version check. Let's return to the assumption that the application is running from a shared location, like we often do. Let's say we have a shared location on the file server, and we're running myapp.exe, and all the workstations are running that. Now, when the application starts, it checks the version number of its own executable against a master version number. Now, where does it get the master version number from? We put it in a text file on an FTP site. So on our FTP site, we are maintaining a simple text file for each different piece of software that someone has. And in that simple text file, which you'll see there, it says version.txt. We'll come back to those other files in a minute. It just opens that file, and it sees in that text file 5.0.6. Now, it looks at its own executable, and it says, oh, hey, I'm 5.0.5. I better run the update. And it runs this setup file, this update file, that is located in the same FTP site as the version text was located in. Now, we also use Stonefield Data Dictionary, so we provide the metadata for metadata updates, etc. And remember, we have a way from our user licensing to know whether we can get exclusive access or not. So if we can, we run all of this, I'm not sure why there's two updates there. We run this upgrade program, and it updates the metadata. It does whatever it needs to do. So when our app starts, it calls a function need upgrade. It gets the file version of our executable. And the 11th parameter, which of course everybody remembers by heart, returns the version in x.x.x format. Then what we do is if it needs to be updated, we run a form called upgrade. And the reason we run that form is we want to show the user a status and make sure he gives permission for the upgrade to run. We open this form, and then we do the upgrade. The user sees a status on this form. Now, we give the user two options. One option is they can set it that this checking process runs every time they start the program. Or they can set it that it only runs when they pull down help, check for updates. Or both. But again, keeping it simple, I'm 5.0.5, this is 5.0.6. And all we have to do for 100 sites is open a text file on our server and change this to 5.0.7, and everybody's updated. You don't have to use this form for status. This way we like to use what's going on. The user has a complete option of when to check. It's not completely seamless because they do see what's going on. It requires basically no action on their part, but they have to set in the system how they want it to be done, whether they want it on startup or not. And it can update everything that it needs to, file structures, work dates, et cetera, et cetera. So the winner for how to do updates is self-update. Let the system make a simple check, and if it needs to, grab the update files that it needs, use the user control if the user licensing system, if the end user gives permission for the upgrade to run.
Tuvia, how are you updating the exe that's running?
That code, I believe, is in the doc. But it's an excellent question, so I'll just tell you right now. We use a trick, a really cool VFP trick, and I wish I could flip over to FoxPro and show you, and that is we do a shell execute. Now, you're going to say, wait a second, I'm running myapp.exe, and I'm going to shell execute out and run the upgrade program, but the upgrade program wants to overwrite the myapp.exe that called it. That's impossible. Aha! It is not impossible. Because of a little-known fact that shell execute takes a certain amount of seconds to load. If you do a shell execute followed by a quit statement, you will never have a conflict. So we start the upgrade program by calling the shell execute, and then we quit the myapp.exe. Now, I thought this was a brilliant invention of mine until Southwest Fox last year when I was giving this presentation, and Doug Henning, who was one of the organizers of the conference, raised his hand and said, "That's an awesome system. We've discovered that about 5 years ago." So I guess I wasn't quite as smart as I thought I was. But you do a shell execute and then immediately quit the program, and the update will be running and be able to overwrite the program that just called it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought you had maybe some really clever way you could leave that upgrade screen on the screen while it replaced it, but you can't do that.
You cannot do that, no. Not going to update the executable.
Right. Okay, thanks.
What we do in the, we also have a status screen in the upgrade program as well. So the user sees it flicker for a minute, sees that same form come back, because we have the same form in the upgrade program. So the user doesn't really know what's going on, except there's a flicker, it's creating, and it flickers again, and it's back. Now, our fourth thing that should be under the control of VFP is customizing features. Even if we make vertical market applications, or whether or not you're making one-off programs, it's likely that you have the same basic program running at more than one client site in some way or another, especially if you're creating vertical market applications, which comes up to the fact that Client X wants a customization. Client X is willing to pay you that their program will work slightly different than everyone else's program. Now, you want to maintain your pure code base, and you're reluctant to do that, but we're all in business. So if the client is willing to pay for it, we're going to have to do it. So basically, we've got a couple of different ways that we can do that. The first thing is external app files. So we have our loader again, myapp.exe, and each different section of the program has an app file. So for example, an accounting system might have an AR.app, an AP.app, a GL.app, a payroll.app, etc. Now, each of those app files is generated by a different project on our end. So we can label versions whatever we want and distribute a specific app version to specific clients. So I'm running GL.app version 23.x special 1, and everyone else is running GL.app 23.x special. Because GL.app is its own project, and I've tinkered it so for this particular version so that it is a separate. So I have a separate GL project for that special client. So I have an AR project, an AP project, a GL project, a payroll project, and then I have a GL special 1 project, which makes an app for that client, and it shares most of the code with the regular GL app project. Now, there are significant advantages to this. The advantage, even though it sounds like so many different projects and a roundabout way of doing things, there's a significant coding advantage for testing. Because when you want to test your specific features, you know you're not stepping on anybody else. You're running the application, the app file, GL special 1.app, the exact one that your client's going to be running. You don't have to worry that they will not get correct features, because it's very easy to test whether that app, what it's supposed to do for them, that .app file, because you're running that special .app file. And it's less error prone for what I call cross-feature errors. Cross-feature errors is a term that I use for when I'm making a special feature for client 1, and I inadvertently mess up something for everybody else. And it's usually not in that particular feature, but it's usually that I've called some method or done something that, unbeknownst to me, and 3 months from now, when people are running their AR.app tax reports, is going to make a mess for me. However, if everything is in its own .app file, that can't happen, because I'm only testing this exact app file, and it only has the features for that client. Now, the cons to using this system of .app files, which, by the way, is a system used by many large companies, is distribution is more difficult. Whoops, I have to make sure I always give them the GL special, .app. The code maintenance you now have, if you keep this up, eventually you could have 25 projects. So it's prone to compilation errors that you forgot to recompile every one of your 25 different projects when you change the code they have in common. So it's extremely good for allowing the feature to get to where it's supposed to go and work right, but it's a big hassle to maintain, and it's prone to errors on our end, the developer's end, in terms of compiling the project with the wrong thing in it. The other option is bracketed code. This is probably much more common. So we established that every client has a site name or code, client 123, and so if client equals client 123, we give them whatever it is. That can be different forms, classes, reports. It could be a minor change or it could be massive change. We have clients that, there's 5 different AR month-end forms, depending on what your client name is. Now, it's easier for distribution. You're still giving myapp.exe, that's all there is, and one project to compile. Very easy to compile and distribute. However, the chances of coding errors and testing errors increase exponentially with each customization. I was just looking at one large app we have, and we have over 300 bracketed things like that, and it's not just a simple message box. What could be bracketed is a whole series of forms, transactions, reports, etc. So when we test that out, it's very easy to find that something has gone wrong for the other users. The new feature works great for this company, but I've got 200 other users that don't want that new feature, and it looks like it's working fine until next month I discover that all their reports are printing out with the wrong margin because of some global variable I set or changed accidentally for client 123. And the more of those customizations you do, the more exponentially great your problem becomes. So, option 3, and this is what we suggest, is the democratic system. We are all equal code. All options or customizations are available for all users. In our example above, if we want to have that, if we want this client to see howdy message, we don't go by their client. We have an ini file or a setting in the system. Howdy messages, yes or no. And if they see howdy messages, they see messages. It has nothing to do with the client or the site running it. It has to do with the feature. So if the client wants a feature, it becomes a feature in the system. It's now a program application option. Now, what we do is we don't always highlight for all the other customers that they can change those options, depending on how much we want them to be able to change them. But from our end, everything is an option. Believe it or not, we use ini files. We're not big fans of the registry. And an ini file can have in it howdy equals yes. That makes it very easy for us to test. We go into our ini file. We try every combination of options. Because nothing to do with the client. It only has to do with the features. It's much easier for distribution because you're still giving one executable. It's easier to test, and it's more familiar to programmers. It is not natural for programmers to work with clients have different features, but it is natural for developers to work with programs have different options. Sounds like the same thing, but to the developer's mind, it's not. They don't program for clients. They program for features. I know of no cons to this system, and it's the one that I highly recommend. So with all the buzz about platforms, technologies, all the things we're going to do with Visual FoxPro, it's important to ensure we have a solid understanding of the day-to-day development and distribution options we have available to ensure control over our applications. If there are any questions, I'll take questions.
Do you mind telling us kind of the products that you do have, how many users those are looking at, how many sites you're looking at?
Sure. Our biggest product line, we have 3 vertical market applications that are in significant distribution. A few others that we've tried over the years with various rates of success. And I would say the largest distribution of those is probably at 300 to 400 sites. And a site can have anywhere from 5 to 50 users. Now we are moving all of our vertical market applications to the cloud, but that's somewhat of a different story and a different session. And we're doing that because our users say we want the cloud, even though they don't have the foggiest idea what they're talking about. But I would say the largest user of one of our systems might be 200 users, and the smallest would be 5. Typical would be 10 to 50. And then the two vertical market applications, slightly less, maybe a couple hundred sites each. One of them tends to have more users, has probably 30 users to 50 users, and the other probably 10 to 50 users per site.
Okay. In your
these control problems though are also, when we make a one-off for somebody, what kind of arrangement we have for these people, I don't want them take, they may not be able to take this and distributing it to all their friends.
right, yeah. In your check for update program, how are you dealing with determining whether or not the database is in use to install your SDT, your Stonefield stuff?
Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm going back to my user licensing, and I'm using that control file and seeing that and making sure that no one is logged in. So in my control file, let's go back to the control file. Whoops, too far, sorry. Okay, so we had a control file that we're using. Let's say we have 5 records in it for 5 users, or 50 records for 50 users, and we're R-locking to see all of the users. So if I can get a file lock, or if there are no records that are, if I can get a file lock, that means that there is no one with an R-lock, and there are nobody logged in.
Right.
If I can't get a file lock, then I can give them the option, and I can show them, because I have an accurate record of who's really logged in, I can show them the people that are logged in. So they don't have the, and we can message them, and if they refuse to cooperate, the administrator knows who it is that's still logged in. So we determine it by getting an F-lock on this file. Because if all records are empty, we should be able to get an F-lock. If even one record has an R-lock, we won't get an F-lock.
Okay, but I've got a check for update functions you have, and the my update maybe needs to change the database structures, and you need that exclusive access for one person.
Correct.
And it only has to happen once. But then for everybody else,
Correct.
they don't have to have it exclusive anymore. Are you dealing with that issue?
Well, no one else can log in while this update is running. While we're updating the structures, we don't let anybody else log in, because when they try and log in, they can't get an R-lock anywhere on this file.
But how do you know whether or not the database structures have already been updated by somebody else?
The Stonefield Data Dictionary has a function that does that.
See.
When we load the data dictionary, it tells us whether or not an update is needed or whether it's already at the correct level.
Okay, and then your update process can deal with that.
Correct.
And go
so that there's a set of metadata from Stonefield, and it has a comparison function, and I can get a value back for whether an update is needed, and I can even get an option back for whether it's a structure update or an index update or whatever it is I need. To us, we don't care if an update's needed. An update's needed. And in fact, at one point for one application, we actually ran that frequently just as a paranoid check to make sure everyone was on the right database level. But Stonefield Data Dictionary has a function to do that.
Okay.
And then once we see that an update is needed, then we get the F-lock or not, depending on if people are logged in.
Frank is wondering if you can post the URLs, but I guess when the Southwest Fox site goes up, we can get to the doc.zip to download the whole thing, right?
Yes, and if you want, I'll put a copy of this PowerPoint presentation on there as well, and so then it'll have the URLs in it.
Cool.
I checked with Southwest Fox. This is not exact Southwest Fox. I've changed it and modified it a little bit, but presentation, the same ideas. I checked with them, and they said that after the Southwest Fox conference, there's nothing prohibiting me from using the same materials for you, because I was concerned that maybe they have some sort of right to these materials, but they said no. So I adjusted a little bit, but it's 75 or 80% the material from Southwest Fox. Everybody come to Southwest Fox.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Tuvia. We'll give you the virtual applause.
Okay. All righty. I appreciate it. And let me see how do I